I am Jackie. I'm a program manager at Brookline Adult and Community Education, and I'm so excited to welcome all of you tonight to Operation Restoration. And to introduce our esteemed speakers, we have Nan Ives and Lisa Stornaielo. Nan is a brand marketer and social innovator who led marketing, communications, and corporate social responsibility strategies at Fidelity Investments for 27 years. As the principal of Experiential Innovation, Nan capitalizes on her expertise in design thinking to help people immerse themselves in the human experience to reimagine future possibilities and build smarter solutions faster. Lisa, welcome Nan. Lisa Stornaielo is a seasoned talent management consultant who leads organizational transformation efforts and architects leadership development strategies and experiential learning opportunities. Her consulting, coaching, and facilitation improves business performance, accelerates leadership preparedness, and supports culture change. Prior to launching her consulting practice, Lisa led an internal leadership development function at Fidelity Investments, where she established an enterprise curriculum of learning pathways for 5,000 global leaders. So thank you, Lisa and Nan, and I will turn it over to you with the encouragement for any of our guests this evening to type their thoughts and questions into the chat, and away we go.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. So welcome, everyone. Nan and I are really excited for this opportunity. Jackie and Michelle, thanks for the invite to be able to come and speak to you about a topic that's really near and dear to our hearts. We've done some research over the past year, and we want to share some insights of what we've gathered on the topic of retirement life planning. And as Jackie said, we really want to make this as interactive as possible. We have a lot of information to share, but we want to make sure that you get your needs satisfied. So feel free to put things in the chat as we move forward. So I thought we'd start off with some realities about retirement. So there's been a lot written about retirement, as I'm sure many of you are aware. And the thing that really stuck with us when we first started this was the thought that baby boomers, who we know are one of the largest generations in history, actually seconded only by their offspring of millennials, that they all 73 million of them will be age 65 or over by the year 2030. And so what that really kind of constitutes is that 10,000 people between now and 2030 will be turning 65 each day for the next 10 years. And so what we've also found is many of these people aren't ready to stop working at the retirement age that we've traditionally known as 65% for lots of reasons. Some want to be semi-retired, some want to start their own businesses, some want to consult, some have to for financial reasons. And so we've looked at the US Census Bureau and AARP and really started to cull some of these statistics. In addition to all of that, life expectancy is growing due to advances in medicine and science. The average life expectancy in 2017 was 79.7, 77.3 for males and 82 for females. And older adults are, for the first time, really projected to outnumber children under the age of 18 for the first time in history by 2034. Lastly, we all have heard a lot about, as you have heard, Nan and I worked for many years in a major financial services firm, Fidelity Investments. So we've all heard a lot about retirement and saving money for retirement. And statistically, we've learned that about 30% plan on working past 70 for financial reasons. So these were just some of the basis of statistics that hit us as we started to, to work in this. So when you hear the word retirement, what we were wondering is, what's the one word that comes to mind? And if you could type that in the chat box, we'd love to kind of hear from you. So what's the one word or short phrase that comes to mind when you hear the word retirement? So travel, adventure, old, pursuit of passion, flexibility, Florida, right? Freedom. So many options. Many of these terms are what we heard as well as we started to engage with folks in our community. And so what we also started to say is, you know what, we need a new lexicon for the term retirement and a new definition for what it means. And so we went to where all good researchers go, thesaurus.com, right? And looked at what are synonyms for the word retirement. We thought we'd start there. And so this is what came up as we started to look at those synonyms. So take a moment and just look at these and let them kind of sink in. Not a really happy picture, is it, when you think of some of these words? And quite frankly, it shocked us when we looked at them because we were thinking of going there to get a broader, richer terminology to use instead of the term retirement. I don't know about you, but I don't want to think of my retirement as banishment and solitude and seclusion, right? I want to think of it as options and flexibility and passion and pursuit, some of the things that you guys had put in the chat box. And so what we started to say is there's a real disconnect, and what we started to become aware of is between the word and how people's perception of retirement have evolved over the years. And so that's where we started to launch our research. As many of you know, this isn't your father or mother's view of retirement. There's a difference between the traditional thoughts of retirement where you're sitting still and watching life pass by, where you're playing bingo, where you're going, eating before 5 for the early bird special, where you are spending the majority of your day in leisure activities of golfing or fishing. That's the real traditional view. And what we're seeing is many examples of people entering retirement and connecting to their passion and pursuits and really fully getting into their bucket lists. Some are working very actively. Some are entrepreneurs and starting new businesses. Some are not only helping with, spending time with their grandchildren, but also helping more full-time with childcare. And many are pursuing their passions, things that maybe they had put on hold as they were advancing their careers and or building their families, but coming back to them. And so it really led us to believe that there needs to be more of a new kind of reboot of retirement that involves this more kind of a holistic view. So I thought we'd share a little bit about what kind of brought us here and who we are, because many of you may be wondering that. And when Nan and I first started this, I remember saying to her, this reminds me of that old Cy Sperling ad for the Hair Club for Men. We're not just the president, but we're also a client. Both of us are at this stage in our lives where we are planning and or pursuing our retirement. And in addition to that, we also are just really impassioned by this topic and want to be able to provide roadmaps and tools to help accelerate folks' thinking in this area and help support it. So it's very exciting. So let me share a little bit about me and what kind of jazzes me about this. I have a high school senior who's my youngest, and about 4 years ago when she entered high school, we were starting to do some life planning as she was readying to go off to college and figure out what her career would be. At the same time, my company was offering an early retirement, and many of my friends, including Nan, took that early retirement. One of the roles I played at Fidelity for many years was coach and facilitator and leader development. So I just naturally started to coach some of them. And I started to think about, geez, soon, even though I'm a little bit earlier in my pursuit, soon I'm going to be in that stage. And when the opportunity comes, I want to have a plan and I want to know what I want to do. So it also occurred to me that as my daughter was going off to explore this, I was in a similar area. I was in a similar position to her. And she had all these research sources that were very rich to help her. And so I said, geez, I should start to go out and start to think about what my chapter would look like and look at resources. And all of the resources that I found were really limited to financial planning. And I had the luxury of working at a company that does retirement planning financially very well. And so I felt very like I already knew that part of it, but needed to know, well, what would I do with my day? And I don't want to just stop working. Like the old view of retirement is that you stopped working completely. I want to think about how I change what I do and how I dial things up and down. And so I kept looking for resources and I really found none of them. And I started to think, all right, well, I'm going to create my own and I'm going to do my own roadmap and toolkit. And then I started thinking, well, geez, one of my strengths as a leadership development consultant for over 30 years is I architect roadmaps and tools to help leaders learn and grow. So wouldn't it be cool if I did that for me and my friends, and then also started to put this together as a business, did some research, and offer it to help others accelerate their journey and relieve some of their anxiety as they go down this path and get as excited about it and looking at all those opportunities as my daughter is, as she embarks in her first career and going off to college. So that's what motivated me. I'd like to turn it over to Nan so we can hear from her.
Sure. As Lisa mentioned, I spent my entire career at Fidelity, so in marketing. So, how can we get people to save more retirement, think more about retirement? And I started doing my financial planning, and I remember the financial planner asked me a lot of questions that I couldn't answer, like, where do you want to live and what do you want to do? And you're talking about 10 years out and making some kind of, projection about what you want to do. And I thought that was kind of an interesting process, that we're planning for our money, financial part of it, but we really don't have a life plan. And so when I took the early retirement package from Fidelity, I was like, oh my, this is the greatest thing that ever happened. I went off and played 55 rounds of golf. I did some pro bono work. I started doing a little bit of consulting. I got hired somebody hired me to produce a 1,600 person event. And I was like, oh, events is in my DNA, I'll do this. And then I was like, I really don't want to do events. Why am I doing this? So I went through sort of a series of experiments on figuring out, what's my portfolio life in retirement? How much do I want to work? How much do I want to, continue to play golf and kayak, and I go to the Cape and travel and family, but what does that look like for me? And so as Lisa and I were sort of talking about this topic, we were really realizing that the financial planning side of this needs to be much broader than just how much money do you need to live in a state where you never work again. Because what we've learned through our research is there are people who are working into their 80s and people are starting businesses at 65. And some people say, I've made the decision to never work again and that's my decision. But it is a journey, it's an evolution, it's a series of experiments and some failure and some good to kind of get to the point where you realize, like, this is what I want to do. So I think we both got very passionate giving our background at Fidelity, but then also our personal experience with retirement. And we certainly have learned a lot, and we're interested in sharing a lot of the research we've done and sort of where we're going with all this. Cool. So as we started to think about sort of our mission in this work, and we're still in the beginning phases of it, but we kind of began with a hunch and sort of a personal reality that retirement as it's positioned and viewed today is outdated, in need of a reboot. And so we started to say, well, what do we believe? We believe that people need to reframe how they approach retirement planning. Finances should be just one element of a much broader holistic life plan. And that people should sort of step back and reimagine without any preconceived notion of what people should or shouldn't do. You get a lot of people saying, oh, you're retired, why do you want to work? Or, how's your golf game? Or whatever it is, but people have kind of preconceived notions of either you want to keep doing what you were doing or stopping completely. And we think that we should throw that on its head and reimagine and help people do that. And we think, as Lisa mentioned about her daughter, that people should be excited and engaged in planning this stage of their lives as they were in planning earlier stages. We're going to share stories and research that we uncovered, but we met a lot of people who either said, I'm going to figure it out as I go along, and that didn't really come to fruition, or people who really set forth to say, I'm going to transition from this life of my professional life to my new sort of life in life 2.0. And so there's a lot of sort of excitement and engagement that needs to happen to really get to that point where you do have a portfolio life of whatever that should be for you. So what we did is we used design thinking. We're not putting this in to sort of talk about design thinking, but this is a methodology that I learned 10 years ago at Fidelity, and I've never looked back. I use it in every piece of work I've done. It's a methodology that comes out of Stanford University, and it's used by all of the major companies: Fidelity, IBM, JetBlue. Think about all of what JetBlue did. It was all based on design thinking, and the premise is that you really start by walking in your customer's shoes. How do you immerse yourself in the human experience? Okay, so Jackie's saying I'm having a hard time. Am I going in and out, Jackie?
I think it's just a little staticky.
Okay.
Maybe see if you project your voice perhaps directly towards your microphone.
Okay.
Let's see if maybe just being
Okay,
a little
let's
bit
try
more.
that. I'll go. How about if I lean in a little bit? I think my Wi-Fi is a little short.
There, I'm feeling that's a little bit better.
Okay, thank you. So design thinking is sort of immersing yourself in the human experience. So Lisa, as we did, and I did this, we interviewed 50 people at different stages of their careers, and we really walked in their shoes and learned about what their experiences when they were building their career, thinking about retirement, and then going into retirement. And then we found sort of some of the problems that people were having, and we really focused on that. And then the last couple of weeks, we've set out to have some ideation sessions with lots of different people who are engaged in this. And we're going to build a prototype and a test. But so this is sort of the foundation for our methodology to sort of, immerse ourselves in the human experience and fall in love with the problem. Is that better, Jackie? Okay, cool, thanks. So let's give you guys a little bit of a lens into the type of people that we interviewed. We sort of got inspired by 3 different types of people. People who were what we really felt like fulfilled retirees. These were people who had either set forth on a vision to say, I'm going to continue to do something in the same capacity, but I'm going to change it a little bit. But they were either working in some capacity. Most of them also had some kind of leisure activity. They were engaged with their family, but they were all telling us these were the best years of their lives. Many were in their 70s, some in their 80s, but they were doing many, many positive things: meditating, exercising, working, whatever it might be. We also talked to people, and we were really intrigued by people who had sort of pivoted and risk take throughout their career. So people who have said, oh, there's an opportunity, I'm just going to stop this and go off and do this. And there's a lot of people, we talked to a gentleman that actually came out of theater that's now an executive coach. Like, how did they think and what did they do? Because this is a time that you really have to pivot and take risks. So what's the DNA of those folks? And then we talked to people who were passion workers that had gone off and said, you know what, I was in IT and now I really want to write, or I want to play music, or I want to sort of explore, paid or unpaid. These were people who were really had a passion and were putting themselves out there to really embrace what sort of charged them up and made them excited. And then we talked to a lot of people who were career professionals that were thinking about retirement, whether it was 2 years on the horizon or 5 years, but people had spent a lot of time going, okay, I'm going to retire, whether they were hitting an age or they had a financial milestone or their kids were going off to college or finished college, whatever it might be. These were folks who had been thinking about it. Then we met a lot of people who were sort of anxious about it. They were having a hard time letting go. What do they do? You know, it created a lot of anxiety. And then sadly, we met people who were actually kind of disillusioned in retirement. We had a couple quotes of people who said, this is really hard. You need to get really prepared for this. We had other people who said, oh, I talked to my friends, half of them love it, and half of it didn't love it, and that impacted them. But there are people who are out there that are kind of disillusioned. You know, COVID has made it worse or maybe accelerated the problem, but not everyone was disillusioned. But these are the people that we want to help solve, because we do think that they need some kind of life plan and sort of a roadmap for this. So on our next slide, we're going to sort of take you, oh, wait. Do any of these sort of sound familiar to you? And like, do you relate to any of them? I think we wanted to just get a pause and figure out, are people retired, fulfilled, thinking about it, maybe already retired and maybe thinking it's not great? Let's get in the chat and see what we come up with. Got some anxious, okay, thinking about it, about to begin. Planning to announce my retirement to my organization tomorrow. Go Nancy, okay. Retired 2 years ago. COVID had made it hard, easier before, a little disillusioned, forced to retire due to pandemic. Yeah, dental hygienist, I can understand that. Wow. Thinking about retirements 15 years or so down the road, retired and unsatisfied. Interesting. This is fantastic. We didn't really know what we would get, but you know, I think this is a journey, and as you can see, some people are maybe not satisfied thinking about it. I love that people are thinking about it 15 years down the road. So there's definitely a lot of emotions to this. Oh, I like this. I've always been a risk taker, sold my business, and figuring out what risks to take next. So you might be an inspiration, Joan. Let's just go off and do it. And Lisa, any insights in this?
For me, it mirrors who we've spoken to as well. And so it just goes to say that people can be in different places in this. And one of the things that we've continued to hear, and what we want to do, is we've spoken to people who have successfully transitioned and those who might be, as you saw, disillusioned. And we were able to get some key insights and ahas to really help accelerate people's journey and roadmap in this area, as well as we've started to think about and heard a little bit about a process that might help.
Perfect. So this was great. I like this. Honestly, I'm not sure if I'm actually retired, really looking to create a new chapter. That's a good mindset there, definitely.
Well, yeah, I think that really sums up what we're hearing when we said we need to kind of have a new definition for retirement. You know, when I talk to my financial planner, retirement is when you stop earning any money, and it's a zero, you know, it's either on or off. But what we're learning is this portfolio kind of life that people want to have. And it's not just I've stopped working, and it's really about what's this next chapter.
Perfect. It's not easy to say I'm retired. It is not easy to say. Although many people say to you, are you retired, Nan? And you're like, yeah. How did it become such a negative? I don't think it is a negative. I think it's just a point where people it needs a reboot. So let's go to the next slide, Lise, because I think that'll sort of give you insights on what we learned. So the first thing we learned is that retirement needs a reboot. Sort of the traditional concept, you know, definition is sort of limiting and unfulfilling. So I think that it's not negative, it just is limited. And actually, we looked up the origins of retire, and it comes from 16th century French is the origin of retire. So it's a dated concept. We also learned that uncertainty can be really paralyzing. There's a lot of anxiety surrounding retirement, and it impacts people's ability to create and execute a plan and ultimately make the shift. So we found a lot of people who are still working, didn't really want to be working, but didn't really know what to do next. It's more than money. You know, we've talked about this. Just having a good financial plan isn't enough to give the people the freedom and comfort to make the change. They need to know how they're going to spend their time. So one of the things that was really key is, how do you ignite a passion? How do you find something that people, like maybe you did in elementary school that you thought that was really great or always wanted to do, but it's important to really get in. Am I still statically, Lise? Okay, I'm going to keep going. You also have to take a holistic view. So a lot of people might identify, like, I was an accountant, I was a dentist, I was in marketing, I worked at Fidelity, but what are my skills? What would I do throughout my career that is a holistic view of my capabilities outside a title? You also have to be a change champion. So you have to really be out there ready to sort of do this pivot and risk taker kind of mentality, and be able to go out and do things that you might be feeling comfortable and take a chance and try things on, and they might not work and they might not work. We also learned that relationships are so key in all of this. You need a really big network of people, not a big network, you need the right network to be able to connect in to help you sort of traverse through this, whether they're like-minded people or people who are on the same journey, whatever it needs to be. And we also believe that people need to create a portfolio life. Don't go off and do one thing, go off and do 5 things, and try to figure out how you sort of explore and find out those right things for you. And you also have to know yourself, like, what are you good at, what are you not good at, what are you comfortable with? So there's a certain comfort in knowing who you are. And then finally, you really need to be like an explorer. You got to go out there and try new things and go off and just get excited about just jumping in, even if it's uncomfortable or whatever. But those were sort of the insights we learned from the 50+ interviews that we had. So I think we're going to the next slide. Lisa.
Yes. So one of the things too that if folks want to put in the chat box, there's many of you that have started to embark on this, and just wondering if there's anything else you would add to this list in your experience. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to move forward, but feel free to put things, oops, there's one, get out of bed. Budget. Yeah, get out of bed, which is really around just get moving, jump in, right? Be patient with yourself, definitely. Great one. We heard a lot around fail fast, fail often. So it's kind of the agile mindset is being really comfortable with failing, because that's how we learn. And you know what? I'd like to change it. It's not really about failing, it's about trying. And a lot of times trying doesn't result in maybe what you had anticipated, but boy, do you learn from it, right? And be aware of your own limiting beliefs. That's a lot of what we heard as well, that you almost have to keep your inner critic, manage it. So I'm going to move us on to the next slide. And so we've lovingly called this the secret sauce slide. What we found is there really were 6 key ingredients to really living a fulfilled life in retirement. And I'm going to review these at a high level, and then we thought the best way to really share them with you is to tell some stories. So we want to highlight 4 people in particular that we spoke to and talk about how these ingredients kind of manifested themselves in their experience. So the first one is something that someone said earlier as actually a word that came to mind when they thought of retirement, and it's really about finding your passion. And we've heard a lot, I think there's a lot written about your passion and your purpose, and some people might say your legacy. And what we found is that really you need to connect to something that would get you up in the morning. And sometimes it's something dramatically different than you've done, and other times it's just reigniting a past passion that you've had. So we talked with folks that maybe had to put aside some things as they pursued their career and or built their family, but now had the luxury of time to be able to come back to it, something that they did on the side of their desk that they were able to really build up into a business or something that they do full time. And so that was really interesting about a place to start. And then the next piece is really around what we call engaging your community. So many of us, especially if we've lived inside a corporate structure for many years, we don't realize how much the folks that we work with become a part of our community. We also have different levels of relationships and networks, but we found that it was really key when we talked to people who've successfully done this transition to leverage existing networks, to learn from others, but also to expand your networks, especially if you're tying into a passion that you haven't done before. There's a big piece around minding your money, and we'd say it even more broadly when you think about all of the aspects of financial planning, you know, insurance and where you live and how you finance where you live, etc. And you need to really, what we found is folks needed to really have a good set and a good mindset around their finances so that they can manage their risks and they can also support their plan so they know what it would take. So it wasn't just money for money's sake, it was money in the context of what they wanted to do. If people wanted to travel, if people wanted to work part-time or not work at all, it was that holistic view that Nan spoke of earlier. Another big piece that we heard from people that was really fascinating was about managing your energy. And that fell into 3 areas: physical, emotional, and spiritual. And so we heard a lot around how people reconnected with dance or nature and hiking, how they established or forwarded their spiritual practices, Buddhism, mindfulness, yoga, and just how they had a more positive outlook emotionally on their life and their journey. And that was a big element that we heard from folks. The next piece that we heard is on shifting your mindset. And it's what someone said earlier in the chat box about checking your inner critic, is the way I would say it. Some thinking that you've had throughout your career that supported success can be limiting at this stage. And you really need to kind of shift to thinking about possibilities instead of limitations and challenges. And so oftentimes we have heard people thinking and shifting to what I want to do instead of what I need to do or what others need me to do. And we heard that theme over and over again. And then the last key element that we've heard a ton about is about chartering your own course, putting a plan in place and revisiting that plan periodically as you try these things, learning from those failures, as someone said earlier, and tweaking it. But most importantly, the word your. Personalize it for you, because we've heard a lot of people say that they were influenced by others and things that others had kind of said they should do, like the whole shoulda, woulda, coulda stuff. But instead, people really started to say, but what do I want to do? And how does that fit into my reality and my vision for my future? So those are the 6 key ingredients. What we thought we would do is kind of bring them to life with some illustrations and 4 stories that we've had of folks that we've talked to throughout our research. So I'm going to do 2, and then I'm going to hand it off to Nan to do a couple of others. So this first person is Bruce. Names have been changed to protect the innocent, as they say. And what we loved about Bruce is his spirit. So Bruce is about 65 years old, and now he's a published author, and he's really living helping others publish as well. And so his background, he was a classical musician actually by training, and he played in an orchestra for many years, and he also taught private lessons. And then throughout his career, after about 15 years or so, he transitioned into computer programming at a bank. It was like the up and coming career and he needed a shift. And then he transitioned to Northeastern University, and for about 30 years, he worked in various positions at Northeastern, leadership roles in technology, setting up admissions and enrollment systems. He became their guy when it came to all of this stuff, but it had a really heavy responsibility, very long days. He started to get disillusioned with higher ed, and he just needed a break, quite frankly. And so he took a package and he decided to consult for a while and semi-retire. And as he started to do that, he said he stumbled around a bit, which I thought was kind of fascinating. In addition to consulting, he started to re-look at and spend some time with music and writing, which were two passions that he had when he was younger. The funniest part of the story is he chipped a tooth and he could no longer play his trumpet. And so he kind of stopped in that pursuit, but he really went deep into writing. And the more he wrote, the more he realized that he loved it. And he also wanted to move out of the city. He had a house in P-Town, so he and his partner moved down there. In terms of his passion, it was all writing. And he really wanted to get to the point where he could flip his life. So he started by doing consulting and writing on the side of his desk. And his vision and as far as passion was that he could flip that and really devote everything to writing. And that could be his job. With regards to community, he realized he didn't have a lot of friends who were writers. And so he very early on found a writing community in P-Town, and he said, I need to be with these people. I need to learn from them. I need to have friends who are writers. And so he built in that community. So much so that now he's a mentor to many people in that community, and he also is helping them publish some of their works. In terms of money, when he was planning for retirement, unfortunately, we had a very bad storm and his house really had a lot of damage. And so he had to really think about, he had this vision of being a writer full-time, but he had to put that off for a few years and do consulting for a few years to replenish his retirement funds. But what got him through is having that vision, doing it on the side, and knowing that he wanted to be that full-time. With regard to energy, it's so funny. He said he spends a lot of time in nature right now. He gardens, he sails, he builds rock walls. And he said something about the rhythm of those activities are very Zen-like, and it really helps him with his writing. And he said he's the thinnest he's ever been and the happiest he's ever been in this part of his life. He, with regards to his mindset, always had a non-traditional view of retirement. He was really influenced by his mother, who had this, keep going until you drop attitude. But he realized that writing is what he wanted to do. And so he needed to turn the page and think differently and approach his life as a writer in this last chapter. And then lastly, around charting his course, he tried a lot of different things, but he realized that he wanted to try these things, but he had to quell his inner critic. And one of the ways he did that is he kept thinking, like every now and then he'd say, I've never been formally educated as a writer, but he just said, you know what, I'm still going to do it. And he kept doing that and having all of these tries and experiments. And that caused him to get to being a published author, which was one of his goals. And now he helps others publish. So that's one example of a story of someone who's used this framework, if you will. Another one that comes to mind is a little bit of an opposite story. And so this woman is Paula. And Paula's really an interesting woman. She's 75 years old and she's fully retired. So she doesn't earn any income at all, in the traditional sense of the term retirement. And she's done that for about 10 years. She had a very varied career. She started out as a labor and delivery nurse, and then she went into TV production in both California and Boston. She married later in life in her 30s, and she had 2 children by the time she was 40 years old. Unfortunately, she found herself in a very troubled and abusive marriage, and her husband abandoned them and took all their retirement savings. and she needed to earn a living wage raising 2 small kids. So she decided to start her own daycare business because that really could work for her. She started planning retirement around 10 years before. She had some health issues. A lot of her friends were retiring. And so it started her to think about what she wanted to do. She asked a lot of friends what they did. Her primary concern, honestly, was where she was going to live and how she was going to fund that. And so once she figured that out, she was kind of on her way. Paula's passion, if you were to think about passion, was really, she was a person who was responsible for everything, and people looked towards her. And so her passion was all the things that she put on hold, like dancing and volunteering and being more physical with nature, etc. All of her interests she put on hold. She now wanted to pursue those. So her passion was really around spending time with her grandkids, being politically active, being active in her church, volunteering, because she always had to stop doing that because of that responsibility. So she wanted freedom. The community that she found herself in, she's a part of a really big network and friend group. So she leveraged that and expanded that to some degree. With regards to money, a lot of her friends had retirement packages. She didn't, as a self-owned daycare provider. But she knew about what she needed in life. And so she was very clear. It was really interesting. She told this story to us around how many of her friends tried to influence her to buy a condo in a 55+ community. And she just realized she just didn't want the trappings of ownership. So she decided she wanted to rent so she could continue to feel free. And she also didn't feel that she needed the benefits of those communities because she had a really broad community of friends. And so she knew her money and her finances and wanted to manage that. With regards to energy, she exercises daily. She goes on very long walks. As I said, she is very active in group exercise and dancing and has a really active spiritual life and very active in local politics and church. Her mindset shift was all on what she wanted to do for her, which was so different than how she spent the other parts, the better part of her life, because of the responsibility that everybody had on her. So she had to constantly remind herself to make decisions based on that. And then she totally charted her own course, right? She listened and took in what others had done, but she really put the Paula flavor on it and made decisions based on what she felt she was passionate about. So those are 2 examples of stories of folks. I'm going to hand it over to Nan, and she's going to share a couple of more with you.
Perfect. So this is Robert, who is a marketing executive turned serial crafter entrepreneur. And he was a crafter throughout his life, but he had been very successful marketing executive, but he had always done sort of crafting, and he had a big, curiosity about how do I continue to expand my craft. He was always was learning. And so he retired somewhat early, 59 years old. And he thought he would consult, and he went off and started to tap into his network, and he got some immediate consulting gigs. He told us about a story where he sat at Bruegger's Bagels for the entire day putting together a PowerPoint presentation, and went home and spoke with his spouse and said, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't really what I want to do. And so he started to say, I wonder if I can turn my art into a business. And he actually started posting online some of the things that he was doing. He was doing these bottle etchings, and somebody that he worked with said, hey, I've got a big event coming up. Would you mind making these as a giveaway? And so he got sort of a paid job through his network, and went off and said, well, maybe I can really actually turn this into a business. And so he he then started to like look at other sort of businesses, and he got very involved in the art world. So his passion obviously was about art, but he really started to look at from the business standpoint, like where's the opportunity? And he started to make bamboo bow ties, which took off, and he won like best in class or best in show at one of the art shows that he went to. So he started to expand it. He said things like, I get up at 4:30 in the morning. I drag my goods off to some art show. I'm doing all menial labor. I never used to do this. I'd have admins and people helping me, and I've never been happier and more engaged in all of my life. So what I think was interesting about Robert's story is that he not only he tapped into his crafting and his creativity, but he was using his marketing skills to advance his business in a really big way. And as far as community, he started to go to craft shows, and he went there as with a beginner's mindset. He started to talk to people saying, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know the space, but here's what I've got. And so everyone at every show taught him a little bit more, and he started to get introduced to different people. So he really used that community in a way that really got him connected to the world that he was now in, and then also helping him advance sort of his business. And we talked to him right when COVID hit, and they had all just pivoted and he started making masks. So he was sort of, creative in the way like, okay, this might not be working right now. Here's what I want to do. From a money standpoint, his retirement package gave him a launching off point, but he had 2 kids going off to college, and he knew like, I actually need to continue to keep working. But I didn't need as much money to go off and follow my pursuits. I mentioned his energy. He was totally energized by continuous learning and growing, and that drove him to the next thing. And then, I think as we looked at how he charted his course, he kind of did it kind of methodically. Some things just kind of happened miraculously, but he really just started to look at opportunities and to build it and to grow it. And he's been doing it for a couple of years now. And he's very successful and really happy. And, he doesn't know exactly where it's going to go, but he knows this is his business probably for the next 10 years. So the next one and final one that we're going to share with is Jane. And Jane was a lawyer. And now she's a volunteer radio host. And she always had she's 68 years old. She had a big passion for Broadway music, Broadway shows, always had a music collection. And so she went off and started volunteering to be a DJ part-time while she was still working to kind of get her sort of passion going when she decided to retire. She was a successful sales marketing operations person. She was a lawyer, so she had a rich and varied career, and she planned for her financial picture, but then she got stage 3 ovarian cancer, and so she had a life crisis that really sort of made her rethink everything. She was still working at the time and thought, you know what, I'm going to just go off and live my life and explore what I love to do. And so not only does she have her radio show that she told us that people listen in from all around the country, she started to actually like look at talent and find emerging talent, and then to bring them into, she was in a resort town on the Cape, bring those into the clubs and things down there. And so she started to become like an agent, but none of this was paid. She just did this all on her own. And from a community standpoint, she started meeting artists. She, leveraged her sales skills to help new friends. And she was like, this is the happiest I've ever been. Don't limit yourself when you're curious. Go where your curiosity leads. And I don't think she ever envisioned this, but she is like fulfilled, and she walks every day and she reads a lot. And so this isn't the only thing she does, but the passion around sort of Broadway and how she's cultivated that into her, her sort of life and retirement is pretty impressive. And I loved, I'll finish with this, is her mindset is don't be negative. Just like Nike, just do it. Don't be afraid of mistakes and taking risks. When you first do it, you're going to screw up, And that's how you learn and grow. And so she had that explorer mindset, and she really went off and sort of found sort of a passion and a life that fulfills her, I think, more than ever when she was, you know, an attorney and also in sales and marketing. So I think we're going to end there and see, sort of ask everyone where, I mean, we've asked everyone where you're on your retirement journey, but have you thought about finding your passion or engaging your community? And what questions do you have for us as we continue to evolve sort of our business around this? Because we do think there is a business opportunity here. Mary Lee, these stories are inspiring. They sure are, definitely. And we talked to people who also were sort of lonely and kind of depressed as well. But I think there's a lot of energy in watching how people have done this. And all of them said it's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. You try, you explore, you evolve. It's great. So anything else, Lisa, you want to add?
You know, just like these stories, they've inspired us as well. And what we hope to do is help people with a roadmap and or a toolkit so that they can make these a part of their own stories and feel that kind of fulfillment. But we're early stage in that. These are very inspiring for us as well.
Yeah, I love this from Mary. I'm just at the start of my journey, but it's helpful to see there's no one way. There really is no one way.
Yeah, that's what we've heard over and over again. What we want it to be, though, is energizing, not overwhelming. And that's a fine line. We recognize that. And so, because we've listened to people on both sides of it.
So here's one. How will we be able to follow your work and research? We'll get everyone's email if you're interested, and we can keep you on sort of a short list, because we're going to actually be prototyping in the true spirit of design thinking. Is we're going to be prototyping some solutions, and we're going to look for people to actually come out and, you know, test what we're doing and give us feedback so we can evolve and learn.
Yes, and we've talked to Jackie about potentially maybe offering some things through the BAE.
Yeah, test it out here. What questions do you got?
All right, Nancy, we're going to get your number.
Well, I can't wait for the big announcement tomorrow. Are you ready?
Oh, we got 3 people.
Yes, 3 exclamation points.
Any questions? So we have a few minutes left for us, and or any insights that you'd like to share, because we realize we're kind of all side-scrolling, let's be honest, right? We had a very interesting discussion with folks a few weeks ago, and someone said, you know, you really have to start thinking about this with your first career. And as you're building, right, your first job in your career, your first step, and there's a lot of alignment between that first and this next chapter. I'm glad that you guys found the stories helpful. Because we definitely found them very engaging and really helpful to us as we put this framework together, quite frankly.
You know, the other thing that I think we learned through this is there were people who were planning their retirement, and they would say, I really want to become my mother, because she's had so many careers throughout her life, and she in her 70s went off and actually is doing something new and interesting. And then somebody else has said, I don't want to become my mother, because she retired at 64 and didn't have much purpose, and she's at 72. She's 72 now, and I feel like she sits around the house and doesn't do anything. And so, you know, there are people that, you know, like these stories that we've shared, that really can be role models for you on how you go off and do it, good or bad. And that was an interesting insight for people to have that sort of top of mind on, wow, I watched somebody go through this and, you know, it didn't go well for them, or wow, it's just amazing what my parent, my friend, or whoever it is does.
There was also a very interesting piece that we're still trying to uncover on how it all connects with spouses and how ready they are. So how couples start to do this, right? So one may be more ready than the other, and there's influences that kind of occur. And so we're trying to uncover some of that as well.
Well, thank you. I don't know if we have any other, oh, there's a few more comments in the chat. This has been such a great discussion, Lisa and Nan. Let's see.
I love that. Yeah. Something I go back to again if I get lost, yes.
Oh, that's great. Well, and I love this. I retired 2 months ago. So one of the things that we're also looking at, in addition to forming this community of retirees or soon to be retirees and helping them, is we're also thinking about, well, what about a network of providers? So could we be an aggregator of certain resources? So as Nan said, we're now coming out of ideation stage and start to identify a series of solutions. And so, you know, we know that there are certain things that we would like to provide. We don't have to provide them all individually. We could pull a network of folks together. So interested in that, in the whole wellness coach, things like that.
Like Nancy, it looks like you already sort of know your next step, which is fantastic. And one of the things I think we also learned is, you know, don't wait till you retire to figure it out. Start thinking about it in advance and really sort of planting those seeds for what you may or may not be doing. And I can tell you that after playing 50 rounds of golf, you know, talking about your golf game, you know, 50 times, it becomes somewhat limiting, whether you're good or bad.
Yeah, and Nan's a really good golfer.
How can we contact you? We will definitely share our contact information. And you know, as we continue to explore, this is great feedback around stories, and you know, we thought we were inspired by the stories, and there were a lot of them after talking to 50 people. I think at interview 49, Lisa and I were like, oh my God, we have to get to 50. Can we do it? Yes, and we got to 50.
And we surpassed that by one whole person. You know, you need to have those milestones. For me, it was to have 12 people tonight. So we've surpassed that. So I'm happy. You need your little goals, right?
Excellent.
Thank you. And thank you all of you, more than 12 people who joined us tonight. And this is a great little community. I'm definitely grateful to be part of it. And Nan and Lisa, thank you. I will get the best contact information and send it out to everyone in email. And you can also come back and do some more classes with us. That'd be great.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Really.
Thank you.
I mean, this is a journey we've been on, and we're excited to share it.
Nearly done. I'm nearly, yeah. Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, ladies. Take care, everyone. Wash your hands, as they say.
Thanks, Jackie.